recapitulate the manifesto of the deep tech momentum, and we all know it's about the deep tech renaissance. And going back into the theme of the deep tech renaissance, or in the renaissance as such, we will know that Da Vinci, way back when, already sketched the ideas of flying machines. However, it took humanity around 400 years to actually make that happen. Now, electric aviation somehow seems to be around the same topic. Everyone keeps saying it's coming, but when is it actually coming? Well, the proof is in the pudding. We're actually going to be joined by our fireside chat now, or within that fireside chat, in which we feature Ivo van Dartel, who has already had his very first flight. I don't know. No, not quite. Are you on the way to it, though? The certifications are mapped out and ready to go, and I think it's no longer a question of if it is possible, but more about when it will be scaling to the globe. That said, he will also be joined by Tommy Earl, general partner at V Squared, one of the sharpest deep tech investors in Europe. And I think, Tommy, you've probably seen enough moonshots to know which one's on the right trajectory. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ivo and Tommy.
So welcome everybody. I think we're gonna, before we start talking, gonna show you a little video to get you primed for what we're gonna talk about in the next 45 to 50 minutes. We try to make it as crisp as possible to leave the room open for questions, but let's start with the video. So I think that's a wrap. Let's go. Let's have drinks. Jokes aside, Ivor, before we're gonna dig a tad deeper in the technology, the plane, why super important. This is not comparable to Lilium or any other eVTOL. Why you've been on this mission, to get the people in the room a bit of an idea where you come from. You had your stands at Airbus, but you started way longer before, already working on aircrafts. If you're just gonna shed some light on why this all happened.
Yeah, so I designed my first electric aircraft 19 years ago as a student in university, when there were no electric cars in the street, really. And the fundamental understanding came that battery technology is now at a stage that you can sustain flight of a smaller, optimized aircraft. So it's about having the best aerodynamics, having the lightest weight, and then there's a limitation in what you can do in range and payload. But within that space, you will have unbeatable unit economics, and you will be clean and quiet.
And I mean, you've been with Airbus then, and everybody would, I mean, there have been some projects out there that you actually worked within Airbus. Why didn't it work within Airbus?
So I was part of the research organization on electrification, which was started by the then CTO Jean Botti, who, after he left, started his own startup in this space called Voltero. But as you know, in corporates, there's the strategy, and the decision was made. They make large commercial aircraft, and therefore small planes was not part of their plan. And then they opted to go into the hydrogen pathway, which I will not comment on. But clearly, if you see all of those startups in Europe and also in the US, I think more than half of them come out of this original Airbus electrification organization, Electra Aero in the USA, Aura Aero in France, ourselves, because everyone who was part of that group understood this is totally technically possible and certifiable.
Yeah. I want to shed some light before we really dig on the technology and why that structure, that plane. I could imagine that Lilium's insolvency and a lot of these eVTOLs did not really work out, not necessarily helped on fundraising, right? What's the biggest misperception investors, operators, and more like the broader audience has when it comes up to electrical aviation? Why is this apple and pears, if you compare it?
Yeah, so obviously Lilium was a very well-known company because they had really good communications as well, and they had this vision about revolutionizing every aspect of aviation. And hence they had an air vehicle which didn't exist, a mode of operations which didn't exist, and technology which didn't exist. Whereas on our side, you can see from this picture, this looks like a conventional airplane. You wouldn't know it is electric just by looking at it from the outside. It fits exactly in existing regulatory frameworks, so there's no certification risk. And it fits in the existing operating system. So it's similar to the people who maybe, when they drove an electric car for the first time, if you have a driver's license, you can get in and drive off, and you have no transition. And this is why the hurdle for us is orders of magnitude smaller, because what it is a traditional aeroplane with an electric powertrain, and that's it.
Okay. And I mean, I guess there have been some demos already from conventional planes, smaller ones flying, but you already mentioned that certification is like the major topic, I assume.
Yes.
So when you started at Endeavour, and a disclaimer, we are invested, and we are invested since the first round, so I heard the stories before, but I think it's super important to understand on what convinced us, and on the contrarian also, what makes sense commercially going forward, right? Because this is obviously not an NGO kind of thing.
Yeah, so indeed, aviation is one of the most highly regulated activities. Maybe pharmacy is worse, but then I think we're a good second place, which means you need to choose the product class very carefully. And there are small electric aircraft certified in operations today with which you are allowed to do pilot training or sightseeing, but you cannot do commercial flights because you would fall into a bigger certification category. And the aircraft size, so this is about a 6-ton weight, 9 passengers, fits into the category, which is the first category you are allowed to use it commercially, so to sell tickets to passengers to fly with it. So to have a sizable market, we need to have a commercial aircraft and not a private or recreational aircraft. If you go to a larger size aircraft, apart from the fact that it's still technically not possible because of the battery technology, you fall into a new category of certification where due to the rulemaking you have to spend billions to get there. And this was what finally was a big trouble for companies like Lilium, because the authorities decided we'll put you in the highest class of certification, so the same as Airbus and Boeing have to go through.
Yeah.
And hence we are in a category where the rule book is stable. We have confirmed with the authorities what the certification baseline is. We have done 2 separate pre-application contracts on the novelties around batteries and engines. We had confirmation in writing and stamped. These are the rules how to certify, and therefore you can start a project knowing where the goalposts are and not have to worry that they move during the game.
I mean, you always hear also, Tesla's burning down because the batteries are overheated. This would be a very shitty situation when you're flying.
Yeah.
How is, the entire safety concept around this? Is this one of the biggest challenges, or?
Yeah, indeed. So if you take an electric car, which also has a road certification, it's required that the battery can survive 5 minutes of fire. So you can stop the car, get out in safety, call the fire brigade, and the vehicle is lost. Now, this is not a possibility when you're in the air. So the regulations on batteries for aircraft say, if you have a non-preventable thermal runaway event, it means you have a spontaneous combustion of cells, your battery pack needs to protect the rest of the aircraft from that. So we see here 60 independent battery packs in our wing, completely developed in-house. Should a thermal runaway event occur, the batteries on the inside will have a fireproof casing that you can see here. And on the bottom right, you see an actual live thermal runaway test where the aircraft structure is not getting the heat, and there's a little exhaust that gets overpressure and gases out of the airplane, after which you make a normal controlled landing. Another aspect is that since we have 60 packs, should you lose a pack during flight, doesn't have to be a thermal runaway, can be just a normal malfunction, it does not jeopardize the flight because you only lose 1/60th of your energy. So the basic concept is highly redundant and highly safe.
What's in for me as a passenger, right? I mean, I could imagine, you already said it, Airbus, they're building bigger planes. I'm going to Munich airport, I'm flying to Berlin, I'm taking the train, I'm going to the city. Why does a 9-seater make sense commercially? Not only on human economics, but how would this going forward, and then let's also come on when going forward will be, how much is it? Is it super expensive? Where do I lift off? Where can I land? Give us an idea on how we're going to fly in the future when I go from Munich to Berlin, let's say.
So you can fly with a 9-seater today, which is very expensive. This is basically a business aviation or private charter product, and there are some people who use it because of urgency or whatnot. Thanks to electrification, you drastically reduce the operational cost, which means you can offer flights on such a plane for similar pricing as you would fly domestically today. So we're talking about a few €100 one way. I came on the train to Berlin. I had the flex ticket. It also cost me a few €100. So if you're a normal business traveler, you'll be able to afford to fly with this aircraft. Now, since we only need to fill 9 seats and we can take off and land from a 1,000-meter runway, we can actually take off from many of the thousands of existing regional airports all over Europe or in the United States. So this is a map of Germany where we have about 350 regional airports. We have more regional airports than ICE train stations. And that means if you're not coming from a bigger city like Berlin, Hamburg or Munich, but maybe you're in a medium-sized city, Friedrichshafen or Kiel or Bremen, but you have an airport, but even in a rural area where you find airports, you can have high-speed connectivity without building the new infrastructure and at a similar pricing as you would by traveling on the high-speed train or on a domestic flight. So local businesses, I mean in Germany, the land of hidden champions everywhere, can meet their customers, suppliers from where they are much faster, have more meetings in the week, sleep in your own bed at night, and not having to spend somewhere driving a car, etc.
I heard a statistic that like the average aviation traveler from a hub like Munich drives 1.5 hours to Munich airport.
Yeah.
What's if I would use regional airports? How, you know?
Yeah. So in Germany, 80% of the population lives within 20 minutes driving off a regional airport. And we did a study that shows which type of traveler would be willing to pay how much to save time. And you see at 60 cents price per passenger kilometer, 32 million new passengers would use this product. In 2025, there were 12 million domestic passengers. Pre-corona, it was 36 million. But it means a lot of people would take the time savings and spend the money. It will cost the operator 43 cents to operate the flight. So it's not only a new offer for the traveler themselves, also the regional operators can make better margins than they can do today.
If we talk about margins, what's an average margin right now for a classic airline?
Yeah, most of them are loss-making.
If they do margins.
Yeah, so especially in the current fuel crisis situation, a lot of airlines went bust because they couldn't hedge against the rising costs. But if we take the best ones, companies like Ryanair, they have maybe a 17% margin. That's really an outlier. That's really a fantastic exception. A normal profitable airline has a single-digit margin. Yeah.
And we're talking on margins. If you have an operator who's flying that, what's the margin on the flight?
So apparently there's passengers willing to pay 80 cents and it costs them 43. So that's 80+% margin, which is unheard of in aviation.
When will this hit market?
So
what are the steps ahead?
So we've sold the first aircraft to an operator in the Benelux. We're now filling up the first 100 slots. You can imagine that in beginning production will be limited, so there will not be hundreds of aircraft coming off the line in the first years. So it's predominantly Benelux, DACH region and the Nordics, where there's also a big political push to make this happen. So from 2030 onwards, probably the first flight you can take is Antwerp to London, probably on a day trip. London City, right in the middle of where you want to be. Probably the most popular route in Germany will be Mannheim to Oberpfaffenhofen. I don't know if anyone from SAP is in the room, but if you're visiting your clients in the Munich area, you can take this flight. But there's basically no limit where this can then work. The continental Europe, USA, but also island-rich areas such as Southeast Asia or in Africa, where you have airports, but maybe not so many highways or whatnot, because all you need is a power plug charge. So you have availability of electricity on your terms, whether you use the grid or you put solar on your airfield, and you can predict the cost because electricity is not as volatile as fuels are. You can also predict maintenance much better.
Talking of maintenance, I guess you sell the plane to an operator, to an airline. Batteries, I guess, are still the thing that has to be changed, right?
Exactly.
But if you give maybe a comparison on all machines have to get maintained quite heavily. It's super regulated. Where is it somehow in the comparison?
So
the intervals.
The biggest maintenance driver for traditional airplanes is always the engine, and overhauling an engine is almost as expensive as buying a new one. In the electric world, and maybe those people who drive an electric car, you don't have to do anything with your engine. It's almost fit and forget. So that part, by the way, the engine supply was getting all the after-sales money and not the aircraft manufacturer. In the electric world, we do know that batteries age. We know it from our phones or from other appliances that we use. But this is an asset that will work for 20, 30 years. So the 60 packs that you see here will be replaced during the lifetime of the aircraft regularly. The batteries coming out will have a second life as storage on ground. But it gives you the opportunity not only to refresh the aircraft, it gives you the opportunity to upgrade the aircraft with new chemistries coming along the way. So if you buy this aircraft and you get it in 2030 and it flies 400 kilometers, by 2040 it might fly 800 kilometers. So your commercial asset improves over time and becomes more and more versatile.
Yeah. As we are a bit in the technology right now, you see it here in the picture. So it's a conventional prop.
Yes.
But the two engines behind that's the powertrain, if you want so.
Correct. So another advantage of electrification is mechanical simplicity. Because aircraft engines today, they are one of the most complex types of machines you can imagine, rotating at 30,000 RPM, thousands of pieces, super high quality metals, and electric motors are really mechanically simple. So you can do something with an electric engine that you cannot do with traditional engines, which is, I'm not sure if the video works, maybe if someone could click play. You can put them on a shaft. If there's no video, I'll just explain like this. So you see these two black units these are actually electric aircraft engines from the Pipistrel. It's a small ultralight. Each engine is connected to a freewheeling clutch. So if you drive your bicycle, you can only transmit moment in one rotational direction. If you go the other way, it freewheels. This is exactly the same thing, but this unit is made for a helicopter gearbox. And then that clutch is connected to a shaft, which means both engines are mechanically segregated. They cannot influence each other. They just transmit torque to the shaft. The propeller cannot backdrive it. And therefore, if you would lose an engine, you just lose a little bit of power, but you're not in a crisis situation where you are today with a classical twin, where it's really the pilot skill which makes the difference. Here it is equivalent of you have a four-wheel drive car, you lose the rear-wheel drive, you can still go on the highway, but maybe you won't go into the mud. Fine. And this is exactly the same. And this is one of the things that the airworthiness authorities liked very much, because they understood this is not only about the environment or about cost, this increases safety. It becomes safer to fly this than a traditional twin aircraft.
It's so funny when you talk to pilots that have been in aviation for the last 20 years, they say I would never step into a electrical powered plane, because they always say, you know, where's my safety margin in terms of if I can't go down on an airport because of weather or traffic or whatsoever. So, but the point is also in the geometry of the plane itself. Worst case, if shit hits the fan and everything goes bad, you just more have the quality of a glider, right?
Indeed. Because we carry less energy with batteries than you would with kerosene, we try to consume less, and that's why we have these long, slender wings, like a big motor glider, which indeed gives you a glide ratio of about 25, which means if you have 10 kilometers of altitude, you can still glide 250 kilometers without power. I have a glider pilot's license myself. I'm used to flying without engines at all, which is obviously one of the inspirations to optimize something better. So yeah, just to recapitulate, we have two engines. Each engine has two inverters. We have 60 electric battery packs divided in 4 lanes. The amount of redundancy is so high, and then even if everything would fail, you just glide. So there's almost no situation other than doing something deliberately stupid as a human to bring you in a situation where you would be in danger in this aeroplane.
You know, potentially also not only the vision, that's a good thing. How long do we have for first flight? When do you expect it? What are you planning for?
Yeah, we're planning to have first flight in 100 weeks. What is driving the schedule is mostly these parts that you see here. So we're building battery packs now. We're commissioning our first engines. We have a ground lab in the Munich area. We will test everything on ground. We will simulate flights, if you will. And then commissioning the airframe, the fuselage, the wing, the landing gear. This you can do with established suppliers. So building the plane itself is not the critical thing. It's getting the powertrain ready and all the paperwork, which we aim to do in 100 weeks. And in an ideal situation, the first flight will be without any events, because you have tested everything that could go wrong on ground. We do have already some very experienced experimental flight test people in the team who've done first flights of first aircraft before. I would not be allowed to be on the plane because I don't have the right license.
No, I wouldn't allow that.
But yeah, it would also be exceptionally quiet. We did now the first noise simulations. Sitting inside will be an experience you do not know in aviation today. And also on the ground, if you're not standing right on the runway when it's coming towards you during takeoff, you will not hear it.
Crazy. That means actually two things if you wrap it up. The use case is pretty straightforward. You're going to sell it, and people either going to operate it or fly it themselves. You said the first hundreds are in the making, in the bookings, if you want so. So if anyone needs a plane, please be fast. It's filling up very fast, and then you have to wait for a long time. And if you say noise, I know that a lot of deep tech momentum also is about defense.
Yeah.
Your chairman is the former commander of the Royal Dutch Air Force, right?
Yes.
Dennis. Maybe shed some light on why this is so interesting for the military to operate.
Yeah, so those who are following up on what's happening in the world right now know that it's about economics and logistics. So it's not only about having the most capable and very expensive platforms, but it's having many cheaper platforms that do the job. So in wartime, you have something called agile combat employment, which means you are going to spread your air forces around, and then you need to logistically support them.
Logistics means kerosene.
A technician, a spare part,
Yeah.
bring a pilot somewhere on a forward base. So this thing costs almost nothing to run. You can charge it with civil infrastructure for electric trucks. It can land on pieces of highway. So there's a traditional logistics mission, but also because it's silent, you might want to drop something somewhere or someone that no one hears about. There's another thing which is maybe less obvious. It's the underlying technology. So we are making high voltage, high power battery packs in a very small, compact form factor. This is certifiable to put on a plane with people on board to fly them from A to B. You can also take these battery packs, put them on a plane with people on board, and use it to power something else. Onboard electricity is a current limiting factor in aerial platforms. Think about radars or anything that consumes a lot of electricity. And now you can get functionality on a flying platform, maybe even a legacy one, that previously you need to do something very special and very expensive. You can basically upgrade, and you see it in Ukraine, where they are very creative in repurposing a 40-year-old Antonov and do things with it that people didn't think were possible before. Now this is one of those enablers because it's such a small, compact unit.
A lot of potentially, when it comes to investors, in nowadays world, everybody's looking for that limitless upside, for the fact that you're taking risk and deploy capital, and somewhat there needs to be a balance. If we do the calculations, right now you're selling the airplane for 5 million.
I think it's gone up to 5.5 if I'm not mistaken right now, inflation.
5, okay, let's make 500 so I can calculate it on 100, which would be 500 million revenues, which is more or less penciled in. That's plus maintenance because you're going to do it and not some other company. And have you ever thought of, selling to airlines is one thing, but why not building your own airline?
Yeah, in fact, what we know is that whatever you can fly electric, you will be unbeatable in unit economics. And I'm not sure if I find what I'm looking for, but we already have about 229 million passengers flying on the 500 kilometer range. If you go up to 800 kilometer range, half of all flights globally are up to 800 kilometers. So by the time in the next decade, where we will be able to fly 800 kilometers, potentially with a slightly larger follow-up program, we will dominate that range of aviation because no one can beat the unit economics. So the unlimited upside is that everything that is currently flown will be electrified, and new routes that were previously not economically viable will start because of this.
I'm just looking at the clock. We have no more time, do we? No, okay. Sure?
Okay. Can we take 1 or 2 questions from the room?
So that's the reason why hopefully, so first of all, thanks Ivo for shedding some light on Viridion, on your plans. We're still fascinated and excited. I hope you are too. Open for questions to Ivo.
Can we do questions? 1 or 2. Okay, who are going to be the lucky individuals? Seriously, guys? No, there we go.
Thank you for the presentation. Maybe to expand on the airliner approach, is the reason you're not considering you don't want to compete with future customers, or is just the way you're thinking about how that expansion from 500 to 800 kilometers to beyond will play out? Just to get a bit of the reasoning there.
Yeah, so if you take Germany, where basically domestic flights have collapsed because we have a monopoly situation with Lufthansa, whose main business isn't domestic flights, it's the long haul. We see local business clubs of Paderborn wet leasing an aircraft from Denmark just to be connected again. So there's a whole vacuum where no one is flying, but where people want to travel. And hence it will make sense to go to those areas. I mean, obviously, if there's someone operating, we'll sell them the airplane and we'll let them expand the market. But there are some areas where there's a total demand for it, but no one is taking it. And that's where we could come in.
All right. I think that wraps it up. For anyone else in the audience, catch them afterwards for a one-on-one. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear from you and engage. With that, dear Ivar, thank you so much. 100 weeks to go. Good luck with the bureaucrats or the bureaucracy, the paperwork. and the logistics. And as Tommy said, if you have 5.5 million lying around, do put your pre-order in.